All right. So welcome to this session. We are all so glad to have you here. So we'll just go through some quick introductions. I'm Sherry. I am currently the interim associate dean for faculty affairs, the full-time assistant dean for faculty development. We also senior director for professional development, and together we oversee our teaching academy. TEACH, which stands for Teaching Excellence Academy for Collaborative Health. So I'm kind of here in two roles, but these are also my faculty development primary colleagues. Oh, you don't have to turn it.
Hi, welcome. I'm Mariah Rudd. I am the director of the Office of Continuing Professional Development and Faculty Development on the school side. And like Sherry mentioned, we oversee our teaching academy, TEACH. And then Dr. Heron.
Hi, everybody. Sarah Harrod. I help this team do all the great work that we do through TEACH and OCPD as the manager for faculty and professional development.
Yep. And then we also have Brenda Wolf, who you all probably know behind the scenes. She does all of the element stuff. She is our #1 elements guru throughout the medical school. And she is the person, we have folks throughout all of the departments to help you all, but she is the one who, if they have questions that ask, she doesn't know, she'll go to a main campus and ask. And then we have JT Adair, who also is mostly behind the scenes for you all, but helps us with all of our systems issues and coordinating our CME, all that kind of jazz. So anyway, this is going to be pretty informal. Just go ahead and shout out a question or raise your hand if you have any questions throughout our talk, if they're particularly relevant to the screen on, okay? So today, hopefully at the end of this session, you're going to be able to recognize a purpose for preparing an updated CV, right? You're going to be able to describe the importance of both content and organization, and then you prepare or revise your own CV. Any questions there? Like, is this not what you expected? Or is this why you're here? I hope so. Okay, because this is what you're gonna get. All right. Uh-oh, it stopped working. I got it. All right. So CV and dossier. You all know who can tell me what basically a CV is versus a dossier? Any thoughts? No wrong answers.
The dossier similar to a resume? Because that'll be a third class, right?
No, we will talk about a resume a little bit, but a dossier is bigger. I like to say that a dossier sort of brings the CV to life, right? Like a CV is sort of a listing of all of your accomplishments, all of your engagement activities, and a dossier is demonstrations of those types of things. Okay. So CV is an organized listing of all of your activities. It's the primary document that we use to really look through for academic evaluation on an annual basis or a variety of other things. You use a CV if you're going to present grand rounds here or elsewhere. Anything related to CMA activity, they're going to ask you for your CV. They're not going to ask you for your dossier per se. But a dossier is like the evidence of your accomplishments. Like I said, it's your CV come alive. So here's the difference. Here's your resume, right? So a resume, I like to think of a resume as something that's like non-academic, right? This is if you're an industry, if you're someplace else that's not an academic health center, and you're not trying to demonstrate activity and scholarship and all these types of things. Also, you're going to have like a 2 to 4 page resume, maybe, right? A bio sketch is even smaller. A bio sketch, we know what that is. Sometimes there's a prescribed template for an NIH bio sketch, but a lot of bio sketches that you would send out for somebody to introduce you or something like that is way smaller than that. Maybe just a tiny little snapshot, a paragraph or two. just summarizing who you are in your professional life. CV really emphasizes all of your academic accomplishments, hopefully. This is our opportunity to say, hey, here are all the things that I'm engaged in, all the things that I do. The length really depends on your experience. So, somebody who's just starting out, you might see like a 5-page CV or something. David Musick, Dr. Musick, on the other hand, feel like his is like close to 80 pages. It's crazy long, but he's about to retire. So that makes sense for him, right? I'm somewhere in the middle. But it really depends on your experience, and it really, all of your publications, all of that should be included as well. Always begins with your education and your professional roles, academic roles. Choose merit, tenure review, promotion, all that kind of stuff. Experience and accomplishments, those are both really important to include, and something that you want to highlight throughout your CV. Experience really relies on relates to the amount and level of experience, but accomplishments are really describing the impact. Like if you have a variety of additional things that you're working on, how many people may have been impacted by what you're doing. There's various things throughout your CV that will relate to your accomplishments, and then what changed or improved because of your unique contributions. All right, so your CV. So all faculty are required really to enter their information. This is, hi, thank you, no problem, welcome. Required to enter their information into our Elements database. I wouldn't say on Valentine's Day, Elements is getting any little love notes. I don't think anybody loves Elements, totally. But it is an effective database for most of the things that it's supposed to be doing. Elements is also able to automate a lot of the things that otherwise you would be doing manually. That's not to say it totally replaces the manual process, but it does. It will also do like a web crawl. It goes out, welcome, come on in. No, it will go out and search the web and bring in things. It will say, okay, Thomas Condit, I see that this is your name out here. Is this the right Thomas? And then you have to verify if this is the right person, that you are the right person to connect this. Oh, it worked too. Okay. There is a lot of initial data entry and editing still required. But what it does is it gives you all the information. It puts it in the right format that VTC asks for. It does the crawl. It puts things, you know, I don't know how much of you, how many of you can recall back to the good old days when you had to put everything in a proper format, work citations, and, you know, what comes first, author, date, you know, should this be in italics, but it does all that. So it puts your references in the appropriate format, everything order. So that's the good part. So for those that, are any of y'all recognize all, so I don't think there's anybody brand new, right, to the system. But anybody who is relatively new, anybody who does, I'm not gonna ask, but if any of you don't yet have information in Elements, there's help there for you. There is help. You can contact Tim May, who is here right there in our library. And he will get you help to enter like the first bullet of information into Elements, right? Because that can be the most daunting. Keeping it up is one thing, but getting that initial amount of information, especially if you're mid-year, it can be, there can be a lot of information. Also, within each of your departments, Brenda works with administrative folks who have been trained in elements. So they should be a good resource for you to go to. And I don't know if I don't think that there are any folks right within dentistry, but of course within surgery, the Department of Surgery, there are folks. So maybe not within your section, but within your larger department, surely there's somebody in every department that works with elements. But if they don't know the answers, again, Brenda's your girl. Any questions yet about this?
A statement like, yes, I am not writing a Valentine to elements. The publication piece is really very straightforward in elements. The presentations that you give, for the most part, are straightforward depending on where you're presenting. Some of the operational stuff that you do and some of those bigger tasks and projects, I struggle to find the right tab
Category.
or icon
Yeah.
or button. So I have a very large other section
Yep.
that doesn't quite fit into all those categories. And I always feel kind of awkward when I look at my elements because I don't know. So would Tim be able to maybe help me with that a little bit or?
Tim would be the person, what I usually like to say about that is sometimes it doesn't matter exactly if you put something, let's say there's GME people involved, so you want to put in the GME section, but it's also grand rounds, so you're not exactly sure. My advice is usually whatever you do, whichever section, just be consistent. Like if it's a similar talk, put it there. But Brenda, any of us, we can help look through your other section and be like, this probably goes here and this, but there's plenty of time for that at the, after we're done with the DEX. Anybody else have anything to say on that? Okay. Good question. Okay, so there are 4 main areas, God bless you, of activity within a faculty appointment at Virginia Tech or VTC specifically. So who knows, what are the 4 areas? Research or scholarship, that is one, absolutely. Give me another. Yes, teaching, absolutely. Wait, I didn't hear. Service, absolutely, that's 3. One more. Clinical, yes. So clinical doesn't apply to everybody, obviously. Clinical doesn't apply to me. You do not want to see what activity I've been doing clinically lately. Other than rubbing Vicks on my son's chest, that's about it. So particularly when it comes to clinical activity, when you're going up for promotion and stuff, which this isn't a promotion workshop, but you do want to demonstrate clinical activity that's in the presence of learners. That's always important. But all of your clinical activities should, there should be areas of that in your seat. Great job coming up with those answers. So teaching, any levels of medical school activity, but this is super important to note. I think a lot of people think because it's a VTC SOM faculty appointment, it needs to focus on VTC SOM students. At VTC SOM, we broadly welcome any type of teaching, right? If it's teaching to medical students, other students, residents, fellows, other faculty members. Something that's important though, is you really want to have, particularly if you're going up for promotion, you do want to have some sort of evaluative documents in there. You don't want to include any qualitative comments or anything like that, but you do want something that's been evaluated in your within elements. Okay, your CV. Or actually, it's within your dossier, but it all goes together ultimately. Okay, clinical care in the presence of learners. In fact, service to the med school, to the academic health center, to community, anything that relates. This wouldn't be like, I volunteer as a Girl Scout leader, or I volunteer. You know, a lot of people do really wonderful things for their children's school or for the community. But when we're talking about service here, we wanted to make sure that it relates to your profession. So not a baseball coach, not, you know, those types of things are awesome. Glad you do them, but they've got to relate to your own profession. Okay, and then scholarly activity and research. Again, here we are broadly accepting of a lot of different research and scholarly activity, which includes education research, includes a variety of others that may not be considered elsewhere as highly. Okay, make sure your CV is up to date. What does up to date mean? We say every 6 months, you got to make sure it's every 6 months. People with a really good CV updating practice have a regular cadence, maybe once a month, every Friday, every time they do something. That's when they're updating it. Other folks, most of us probably don't do it as regularly and keep a little folder on the side or something like that. But it's much less onerous if you either do it yourself or ask your administrative assistant to enter that on a more regular basis. Okay, include everything you've accomplished. Yeah, covered all of those. Yeah, that little date is really the last day it was generated. It's not the last time it was updated. Okay, there's a CV guide available. The CV guide, the way that I talked about your dossier is your CV come to life. This workshop is that 14-page document come to life. So we're basically walking you through that 14-page document. But if you forget anything or you just want to go back and learn more, it's in there, and this will be recorded as well. So we have this presentation for you too. Let's see, all entries. Oh yeah, so all entries really, that's part of the format. They occur with the most recent first, so in reverse chronological order. I'm not going to go through these in depth, but these are your major CV sections. You just want to make sure you don't need, like in the good old days, I think we even put our name, our home address, our maybe even our social security numbers at one point were listed on our resumes. We don't do that anymore. None of that should be included. Not even your license number needs to be included. But all personal information, your educational history, professional history, awards, honors, any teaching, all scholarly activity. This includes curriculum development that you all may not usually be comfortable with bragging about yourself. This is your opportunity to brag about yourself. This is your opportunity to include those things. I know that one of our faculty members, I was in one of her activities that she had spent tons of time pulling together. And I said, this better be in your CV. She said, what? I would never put this in my CV. Absolutely. This is something that we don't do. Grants, contracts, any of you all, Mark, Emily, who are working with grants or any of that, any intellectual property, consulting, professional services, all committees. And you'll see initially committees at the local and regional level, totally fine. As you're moving up in the ranks and you want to get promoted, you're going to be wanting to seek other opportunities at least the regional, definitely the national and international level, just to show you have a national and international presence. That doesn't always mean publications. It can mean presenting at conferences that are open to an international audience. Any professional memberships also, okay? One more slide for me. So information in Elements is used as a first draft, right? So just remember that you are responsible for your own CV. If you're sharing it with anybody, there may be redundancies in there because one example is you may have a publication that's been submitted but not accepted yet. you forgot to turn that over into accepted. So, or you did and it's listed twice, something along those lines. What I like to do is I'll generate my initial CV in Word and then I edit it and keep up to date with that version and my Elements version. Lots of professional needs, information in your CV needs to be reviewed. Can't emphasize that enough. I know I talked way more than my part is supposed to, but I'm gonna pass it on. And you all will let us know if you have any questions throughout the rest. Sorry, Dr. Herring.
Okay, so I'm going to talk with you a little bit about a couple of things regarding your entries, what they should look like, talk with you about how to generate your CV because it's not intuitive in the Elements system. Every time I try to generate one, I'm like, how do I do it again? So we're going to talk about that. And then a little bit about publication metrics, and then I'll turn it over to Mariah. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're putting your entries in, it doesn't really matter what entry we're talking about, consistency is key. So if you're going to enter things like your journal article citations or journal article information in there, the way you do it needs to be the same every single time. Otherwise, when you generate that CV, you're going to find that you're having to go back and put in information that had it just been put in the first time in a consistent way, you wouldn't have to be making changes. So when it comes to journal articles, you're going to want to make sure that you put all the authors of that article in there. When you're entering 7 Elements, if it's not someone within our system, they pop up differently, or they are added somewhat differently than people who are within the system. And when you get into Elements, you'll see what I'm talking about there. You'll want to make sure that you are putting all the information. So the title of your article, you're going to want to put in the name of the journal that it's in. If and there should be a DOI associated with it, you're going to want to put that in, and PubMed index number will go in there as well. Also, for a presentation, this is really important for these types of entries. If you're doing a presentation with a variety of folks or with a group of folks, you're going to want to clearly delineate what your role was in that presentation. So if you're the author and the presenter, you're going to want to put that. If someone else was the author and the presenter, you're going to want to put that too, so you're not overstating your role in that particular presentation. And again, consistency. With a presentation example, you're going to want to put the annual meeting, maybe where that occurred, or the conference that you were at, the name of your presentation. You're going to want to put the location and the date. And all of those fields are available to you in Elements to enter that information in, but you want to complete it as fully as possible. Something else to keep in mind, if Dr. Wicker and I are working on a presentation together and we get accepted to IAMC, when I put her information in, or when I put the information in for that particular presentation, she doesn't then have to go and do it. I will just add her to that, and it'll pop up for her in Elements. So when she goes back into Elements, she sees that there's something pending and she can accept that. And so do your colleagues a favor, if you're on a project together of some sort that's going in Elements, make sure you tag them or add their information in so that they can just accept it easily. Also, you might want to talk to each other before someone does that, just to make sure that it's not being put in multiple times in different ways. Other areas where people will have questions or there may be some confusion, you want to be really clear in how you enter information, is if you're receiving grants or contract funds. And so a couple things to think about here is that you want to clearly delineate your role within that contract work or within that funded grant work. So if you're the principal investigator, you want to put that in there. If you are a supporting investigator, you'll want to clearly delineate that as well. Again, adding everybody that's part of that team. You'll put in information about the award. You'll put in when it was awarded, which can be different from when the funding starts. So you might get awarded a grant in September, and then the funding doesn't start until January 1. And so you'll want to clearly delineate that as well, the beginning and the ending of that funding cycle. You'll also want to put in who is funding the work and the amount. That's really important. Something else to consider too is if it's ongoing work, active work, you'll want to put that somewhere in that entry. If it's funding that has already been fully awarded and the project is over, you'll want to also put that the work is completed. That does a couple different things. It shows productivity, and then it also shows like forward progression in terms of going out, getting additional funding and moving forward, not just that it was a one-time kind of thing that you've done. Okay,
Also, one
yeah, go
one
ahead.
thing that I wanted to add in, for grants, we no longer require you to put in the percentage of time of effort. So just make sure that, I mean, you can put it in, but you don't need to, and sometimes it can be really confusing between, is this my percentage of FTE versus the percentage of time I'm working on the grant? So I would just leave it out.
Yeah, that's important distinction. Thank you. Something else that triggered something in my mind that I need to let you know about too, is if the funding was for something very specific, make sure you note that. So like in this example, this funding was just to purchase telemedicine equipment only. And so if that is the case with some funding that you received, just make sure you're really clear about the intention and the purpose of the funding that you got. Okay, generating your CV. So when these slides go out to you, we're sending these out later, aren't we?
Mhm.
When these go out to you later, this is a clickable link. You'll be able to go in and click on this, and it's a how-to guide. And I looked at it again this morning just to refresh myself, and I was like, yeah, this is very self-explanatory. This makes a lot of sense. I can follow this and do exactly what needs to be done to generate this CV. Because again, when you go into Elements, it just isn't intuitive. You have to go up, click on a little question mark box, and stuff drops down, and then you select that you want to generate your CV. It generates as a Word document, like Dr. Wicker mentioned, and you can go in there with that Word document and move things around and manipulate things and clean things up and get those double entries out of there. You can't do that as easily in Elements with some of the changes, but on that Word document, you can do that pretty easily. Okay, so what are publication metrics? How many people have heard of publication metrics, know what we're talking about? Okay, a few people. So publication metrics, a lot of it is exactly the way that it sounds. So a citation count is exactly that. How many times has this work been cited? And publication metrics show up in a lot of different ways, and I'll talk to you about how that happens, and Mariah will add to that too. There's also something called the journal impact factor. There's a little bit of controversy around the journal impact factor and its origination and what it's supposed to be used for, but it's actually the frequency in which the average article in a given journal has been cited in a given period. Well, that sounds very confusing, and it kind of is. The H index is I think even more kind of confusing. So the example we have here is an H index of 17 means that a person has published 17 papers that have been cited at least 17 times. So again, not confusing at all. And then the I-10 index is the number of publications with at least 10 citations. The one I see most is that citation count. And sometimes I see the I-10 index also. People will, make note of that if their article has been cited at least 10 times. Do you all see different things when you're looking at impact factor or publication metrics?
Yeah, I think
Impacts
impact
to
factor, sorry, like you said, it's variable, and it kind of depends on what space you're publishing in as well. The impact factor of Nature versus something in the medical education space is going to be wildly different. So there's a lot of nuance to these publication metrics, and they may or may not be something you want to put in your CV. But Dr. Heron and the rest of us, we're just trying to show you the different options of available information that may be meaningful to again tell the story of your scholarly activity. So.
And a lot of this activity you can find within like Google's. Oh, sorry. I'm not gonna give it away. I'm gonna barely, but also at the bare minimum, those things, I really don't even talk about them in my CV. But at the bare minimum, I number my publications, which Elements doesn't do for you, you need to do that when you go to Word. I just put a number just so it counts them for somebody who's reviewing that. Oh, you have 72 publications or something like that. So, yeah. Okay.
So some of the primary sources of citations, and these search various databases. So the numbers are going to be different because it's looking at different information across the internet. The 4 primary ones that were listed here, the Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and Mendeley. And then also, if you're curious about how the Virginia Tech faculties have kind of figured out how to responsibly use research metrics or how we should all be using them and considering them, we do have a statement that you can refer to. And as you think about whether to include those on your CV and if it's something that you want to utilize. This is probably one of the most important things that you can consider doing out of looking at pub metrics is getting an ORCID ID. There are a few reasons why this is really helpful as you're putting a CV together. And one of them is that once you set this up, it's free. It is under your name. This belongs to you. If you have a really common name, like my name used to be Sarah Wells, and there's another Sarah Wells, and she's a prolific researcher and has tons and tons of work out there. And I would go into Elements and there'd be all this pending stuff. And I would look and see it like I didn't write anything recently, but the other Sarah Wells had like 10 different articles out there. And it was showing up for me in Elements. And so I would have to say, nope, that's not mine. That's not. But the ORCID ID helps with that. So because I have one now, I might get some of that noise from other researchers that have comment or names that are common like mine was. But the ORCID ID, because I, put that on publications when I submit them to journals, those definitely will come up for me once they are published. And I can go into Elements and say, yep, that is mine. And so it helps to clear some of the noise for you. And I would highly recommend it's free. It's easy to do.
So
Any questions about any of those things?
you need to get your ORCID by that little link, and then you just have to link it in Elements. That's the key second step. Don't forget
That's
that.
how the harvester works, right?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Any questions before we move to, and I'm going to try to go quickly because I know we want you guys to have time to ask questions and work on your own CVs. But okay, so like Sarah talked about, Google Scholar Profile is a great way to showcase your work. And it used to be, that Virginia Tech had Gmail accounts, so you could just link right to your Virginia Tech email, but that's not the case anymore. Now it's Microsoft, but you can create one of these for free using any Gmail account that you establish. It's a nice way to get some of those publication metrics that we talked about earlier, your H-index, I-index, your number of citations. Again, just another opportunity to showcase your work and then pull any of this information into Elements. We're not picking on Dr. Musick. We're using him as an example. He used to also facilitate this presentation, and he has, a lot of publications. So he's a really great example to keep
Maybe
it.
he's a great example, but kind of intimidating. So I might replace it with mine, which is much less intimidating.
But if you, go and search for Google Scholar, you can create your own profile and again, showcase your work, share it with other folks, find collaborators. It's another great way to do that as well. And then, 65 peer reviewed journals for Dr. Musick. And it'll show that on your Google Scholar profile. Oh, and there's the link. So then also Web of Science, a similar way to, again, collect some of this publication metrics and also showcase your work. An important thing that you'll need for this is, again, that ORCID ID to help pull all the information in. So if you haven't already established one, we encourage you guys to do that, not only for Elements and the Harvester feature, but also, for these other ways to showcase your scholarly productivity. And like Dr. Harrop mentioned, these sites are pulling from different databases. So the information might look a little bit different. I don't know that you I have a Google Scholar profile. I don't have a Web of Science profile, but it probably kind of depends on also the space in which you're working, like which one would be more impactful for you to kind of pull your data from. But again, that ORCID ID, linking that to your account, whichever direction you go, is really going to be critical so that it pulls all the correct information. All right, and then alt metrics, I'm going to touch on just briefly. So, and I also, Dr. Wigger, if you want to speak to alt metrics and their their role within the CV process currently or for promotion. I think, it's something that's growing in popularity, but I don't think it's something that's traditionally considered when a CV is being reviewed for promotion. However, again, just another opportunity to showcase things that you're doing that may fall outside the traditional scholarly activity scope. So you've developed a podcast and you have 10 million subscribers. I don't know what the subscribers might be, or you have a really robust X following based on your clinical work or your research work. Those are all metrics that you can also include within a CV to demonstrate your expertise and your engagement within the field. News articles, perhaps. Those are other things that you could put there. I think we have Facebook and Twitter, but Twitter is now X. But there's a lot of different alt metrics out there that you could include within your CV as well. But again, I think they're growing in popularity, but maybe not, necessarily something that you need to include at this point, but to consider in case your scholarly productivity is falling into different realms.
And I think a little description sometimes can be helpful, and there's space for that. Sometimes, more traditional metrics is what the committees, when you're talking about promotion, are used to looking at, right? Publications, service opportunity. And I think one faculty member, Dr. Misa likes to tell a story, didn't have a ton of publications, but had spent a ton of time working on this online resource. And this online resource was internationally well known and had like millions of hits on it and had become like the go-to resource for whatever field it was. But so that really elevated that person's level of promotion.
All right, so quickly just touching on some tips for an effective CV. So pay attention to readability. Like we've talked about, Elements is gonna, put out a CV for you within Word, but just paying attention, making sure that, you're going back and reviewing all the content, reviewing it for accuracy, and then also making sure that, it does have that nice flow and readability. Like Dr. Wicker mentioned, numbering publications can be a great way to help make it easier for whoever's reviewing it to just have a quick snapshot. Oh, you had 75 publications or whatever it may be. So adding things like that to improve readability can be really important. Keep consistent with the Virginia Tech format. So that's going to be imperative if you're going up for promotion to ensure that your CV is in the prescribed Virginia Tech format, which Elements will create for you when you generate your CV out of Elements. Make category headings. I'm pretty sure Elements does create headings for you. But if there's something else, if there's a section where you want to add alt metrics, just making sure that you clearly establish that and label it appropriately. Number your publications and presentations, like we just said. And then including as much relevant information as possible. Like Dr. Wicker just mentioned, if that resource has 1 million views or, 1 million users, information like that you might not typically think is important could be really meaningful for whoever is reviewing your CV to see the impact that you're making within the field.
But also, to go along with that, don't put like a full abstract in to describe something, because that can take up a ton of space that you could otherwise use for something else. And when we're talking again promotion, we're thinking about 100 total pages max is what you really want to stick to. And that includes letters and all that kind of stuff too. So if you take up a lot of pages with your CV and examples within your CV, you can struggle a little bit there.
So brevity and clarity.
Clarity a little bit.
Distinguishing between peer-reviewed abstracts or publications and non-peer-reviewed, Elements does ask you that question, or there's like a checkbox or a category field that allows you to distinguish that, but that's also an important distinction to make within anything that you're adding into Elements or your CV. And lastly, try not to use too much jargon or abbreviations that might be confusing to whoever's reviewing it. So if you're part of a society organization, spell it out and don't just use the abbreviation so that folks have to come back for more information. Okay, some common CV mistakes. So we've touched on these already a little bit, but including too much personal information, your social security number, your phone number, your home address, leave those out. They don't need those. Omitting any information or details that might be really impactful for, sharing your scholarly work or your activity. Incomplete citations. So the Harvester feature is a great way to pull in your publications. But if you're entering something manually, perhaps the Harvester didn't find it, just make sure that you're really careful and enter all the information about your publication or your abstract or your workshop, where it was, the date it was held, the title, the co-authors. Having all that information is critical for having a complete CV. Watch out for those duplicate entries. Again, if one person within our system enters the same information, it will show up twice in Elements. So just making sure you have communication with your colleagues. Of course, if you are collaborating with someone outside the organization, it's not going to populate for them within Elements, but just making sure that if it is an internal collaboration, only one person is entering it into Elements. Putting presentations in incorrect categories. Now, I know that there's probably distinction between, where you might want to put a presentation that you're doing for a local audience versus international audience. But like Dr. Heron touched, consistency is key, right? Like, so if you choose one heading where you're going to put all of your in regional presentations, just keep them all in the same place. And so just be consistent about how you're entering things within Elements in your CV. And then, just general proofreading, typos, things like that. Don't, make sure that it's clean and professional.
One other thing that we see more commonly than I would think is, sometimes we're on a publication that has a good number of authors, maybe like 7 authors, right? Sometimes when the web crawl goes out or the Harvester goes out to get these, it will go on your CV, but not all of the authors will be listed. Well, imagine if you are the 7th author, which means you have a publication in your CV in which you're not listed. So you have to be careful about that. That's why that final review of your CV is super important. And you can see, make sure you're listed. And if you are listed, Elements will build your name within which is helpful. Yep.
Yeah, so just to reiterate that, you are ultimately responsible for your CV. So make sure that you're proofreading it, checking it. What's generated out of Elements is a great start, but you really need to make sure that you're, reviewing it, checking to make sure you're included as an author, making sure there aren't duplicates, and just, generally proofreading it to ensure that it's, the highest quality that it can be. Okay. We are happy to help in the time we have left, or also happy to help further than, the time we have allotted. We can be available via email or phone, so reach out to us. But we also have our emails listed here if you have questions. But we'd like to open the floor to any general questions or to help you guys with any specific CV questions that you guys might have. Yes.
There are things that Elements has listed that I don't participate in, like the media tab. No one's interviewed me for the media. Do I need to put that in there and say none, or do I just delete that whole section?
So that's a great question. Brenda, we just talked about this the other day, so you're very familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like when you download it into the Word doc.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have anything in it, you can just leave it blank.
And does that same principle apply for the dossier as well? So there are certain things that are in the dossier tab that I don't have anything to contribute to. Do I just leave that out completely, or do I put that heading in there and say none?
You can do either or. Sometimes when it gets to us, and we'll just remove it altogether. It won't be one of the bookmark tabs. But also within Elements, we have defined what the CV template looks like. So I didn't realize that media was one of the ones that we identified as something that will be included. But if it is there, you can just either delete it or leave it empty. It doesn't matter. I guess if you have a lengthy CV already and you're trying to save space, it's probably good to delete that. But yeah, if you don't have anything in it, either delete or leave empty. Just be consistent.
And I think I heard you say previously that anything related to mentoring of a student, I have to leave out for FERPA purposes, is that correct?
No, if we, what I referred to earlier is when, if you have evaluations in your dossier, you don't want to have any evaluative comments. You just want to have all the quantitative summary in there. But there are some circumstances for which you would want to have student names listed. You'll have to be the judge of that if it's something you're presenting and to your chair yourself. You might have the names in there. But you have to be careful with that because you don't want to share names if unnecessary and for the purposes of why you're sharing your CV. Yeah. But for your dossier, it's not necessary. But it's not a FERPA issue if you're just sharing them as like somebody you're mentoring. It's sort of like on a publication, you've got multiple people that are listed, their names are